and gentlemen, welcome to How to Cause Controversy on the Internet, a primer. Step 1. Your username. No matter where you are or what you're posting, make sure your username is something that reflects that particular opinion. This is a quick and easy way to immediately let everyone know exactly how you feel, and put them in the proper mind for being angry. For added venom, try using a name that seems to invalidate the opinion of anyone disagreeing with you immediately by insinuating that you are always right. Of course, this isn't accurate in the slightest, nor does your ability to type make it any more so, but they don't know that. Step 2. Ad hominem. Ad hominem is a cheap and cowardly debating tactic that involves ignoring every aspect of the other opinion and claiming that it is automatically invalid because it comes from a place that you find morally objectionable. Has your opponent made too good of a point? Is it impossible to argue against them further on fair terms without making yourself look worse? Use ad hominem! Here's an example of the technique in action. This is developer Honeypot, realizing that their game got negative reviews. Well, we can't have that. This is an industry where negative press can hurt you after all. But look how they underhandedly turn the tables by calling these respected critics with leagues more industry experience than them social justice warriors. Now be warned, this term has been used to death over the past few years, resulting in it losing all shock, impact, or general meaning. In fact, the only people likely to take you seriously if you call them an SJW these days are 12-year-olds on Reddit. The smarter denizens of the internet, though rare, will immediately realize you are just being a douche, so name call with caution. Step 3. The secret weapon. If all else fails, there is one final technique you can use that is guaranteed to cause the entire comment section to devolve from anything resembling an intelligent discussion into chaos, name-calling, and general hard feelings. It doesn't matter what the context or situation, simply invoke the name of Anita Sarkeesian.
There's a phrase I'd like to base my entire career around, and even though some of my veteran viewers may recognize it, I feel it bears repeating on the grounds that it's a sentiment I never want to stop being relevant. Just because I'm an indie developer does not give me license to be a douchebag about it. Not everybody has to like the things I make. Not even the majority of people do. In fact, as long as just one person walks away from my creation saying it enriched their life in some positive way, I call that a success. After all, isn't that the whole reason we became artists in the first place? To share that sense of wonder we felt the first time we experienced the medium ourselves? Bottom line, I have no problem with you absolutely hating anything I make. I'm not special, and thus, I don't deserve special treatment. I'm a relative rookie at game creation. I'm going to make mistakes, and I'm perfectly willing to listen to people call me out on those mistakes because I've accepted the fact that I'm only human. I'd be a fool to expect the entire world to love my games, and if we're being brutally honest, I'd be an even bigger fool to expect my first few games to actually be even remotely good. And apparently I'm alone in that frame of mind. Say what you want about companies like EA and Ubisoft and all the evils they embody in our industry, at least they have PR departments telling them when to keep their gobs shut. Few things have reflected more embarrassingly on our medium over the past few years than the meltdowns we've seen a handful of my fellow indie devs pull. By now, you've probably heard the stories of games like Earth 2066, Slaughtering Grounds, and Guise of the Wolf, not to mention the Day One Gary's incident, the legends of which are still being told on forums today. We've seen reviewers get harassed over the phone for negative criticism. We've seen respected journalists be called trolls over asking very valid questions about misleading promotional material. And do I really need to mention Phil Fish? Because I'd rather not. Now look at a developer like Honeypot, not to be confused with their recently released game Honey Pop, which I reviewed not too long ago, #selfless promotion is selfless. This is a dev that created a dating sim, one that not only features a great deal of nudity and extremely harsh dialogue at times, but also showed a great deal of self-referential, tongue-in-cheek humor in its writing, not being afraid to make fun of itself when necessary. And yet, you would be forgiven in thinking that the people who made a game like that and the folks over at Honeypot are totally different groups based on how they wrote an entire blog post waving away their negative criticism by claiming that the people responsible for it were simply pissed off social justice warriors. Now, does this turn of events affect my opinion on the game? Of course not. Like any good reviewer, I call them like I see them, and I do not backpedal on my opinions. But does this affect how I view the developer from this point on? Oh, yes. Look, I do not agree with what Phil Fish did after his run-in with Marcus Beer, but I totally understand. Coming from somebody who's been there, it's not just the one thing, okay? It's never a singular incident that sets you over the edge. Getting that angry to the point where you're willing to abandon your life's work is a death by 1,000 cuts. That outrage had been building for years, and yet I still see people claiming he needed to have a thicker skin. Well, he did until you morons wore it down to his bones. In a way, I might also understand copyright claims. It's a knee-jerk response born out of pride for what you've spent a great deal of blood, sweat, and tears on. Obviously, none of the names mentioned here fall into that category, and I'm not saying it's the correct response by any means, but we need to at least consider the very human side of where this can come from. That's why it's very difficult to justify statements like this, because it's coming from a group of individuals that A, are picking on people that are just doing their jobs, B, haven't even had time to be worn down yet, and C, should have frigging known better! I also want you to look at this situation past the indie level for a second. I want you to consider guys like Shigeru Miyamoto and Tim Schafer, for whom this kind of bullcrap must be magnified to levels you and I can't even imagine. Can you even fathom the venom and bile guys like them have to put up with every single day? And yet, there they are, still working as hard as they can to keep making our medium a better place for everyone. These are people who have decided that their passion for video games and the joy it brings to literal millions of people far outweighs any negative thing anyone has ever said to them. But they got into this before the age of the internet. They got their foot in the door before it was easier than ever to say absolutely unforgivable things to someone behind the mask of anonymity. So what does that mean for the developers of the future? Do you really think the Miyamotos of tomorrow are going to look at stories of Treyarch employees getting death threats over modding a gun and believe this is a worthwhile field of work? No, they're going to devote their talents to endeavors that won't fill their lives with constant misery, taking all the incredible games that could have been with them. But discussing the community's part in all this is a subject for next week. All I'm going to say for now is, cut it out. We don't need another Phil Fish. And on that note, we could do with having fewer honeypots as well. What will people remember Team Meat for? For being devoted, passionate, and really chill dudes that brought us great characters and super addicting experiences. What will people remember Mojang for? For giving us a bastion of creativity and a spark that launched hundreds of other creators just as entertaining as their inspiration. What will people remember Scott Cawthorn for? For being the guy who took all the jokes that people were making about his Christian games, about the characters being dead-eyed and animatronic looking, and turned it around into one of the most successful horror franchises in the past decade, because that's how criticism bloody works. And how will people remember Honeypot? As the defensive idiots who didn't even get their own joke. We can do better than that.
Congratulations! You are now armed with all the tools you need to make the video game community a worse place for everyone. Have fun out there, and happy trolling! Where the hell is my vodka?